Already at a time in which the American economy is in full collapse, we are rapidly approaching the next Great Depression. People in America cannot afford where costs of living are going. Housing is unaffordable, food is unaffordable, baby formula, as you keep hearing, is apparently totally unavailable at any price. Pretty soon, diesel fuel will be rationed, and after that, gasoline, because Nancy Pelosi has vowed to impose a ban on raising the price of gasoline, which, for those of you who don't understand basic supply and demand, if price can't adjust when there is a supply shock, you just have shortages. The market will not clear. So, the gas station is going to open up. They're going to say, okay, we're full of gas. Everybody's going to line up. They're going to go get their gas, and then they're going to be out of gas, and the gas station's going to have to close. Or if they do limits, everybody's just going to have to sit and wait in line. Okay, you can buy 2 gallons of gas per day. And then they do odd and even license plates. And I don't have to, there's no conjecture here. This is the way things worked in the 1970s. Nancy Pelosi is an old bat. She's ancient. She remembers the 1970s. And that's why she's, dredging this up. This is the way they did things back then, even though it was terrible. That's just the way they did things, and that's the way that she's going to do things now. In the midst of all this, Congress's number one priority is to send $40 billion supposedly to Ukraine. That's, of course, just the cover. It's going to be laundered through all sorts of entities. It's going to go to, everyone who's in on the Ukraine grift. It's completely, I wouldn't say completely unknown, but completely unpredictable. Who's going to get however much money. We just know, this is $40 billion. It's going to make people feel good. Oh, look, we gave $40 billion to Ukraine. It's not going to be feeding any, starving children who are refugees from the war or something like that. It's going to go to buying Raytheon bombs or buying up new rifles or something to send over to them, or ammunition that they can't use in their guns because the Ukrainian army uses 5.45x39 ammunition that is made in Russia, a country in which we have banned the importation of ammunition into the United States. It's going to go to Turkey to buy more of these Bayraktar drones, which you don't hear about anymore because I guess they were all shot down in the first couple weeks of the war, or maybe just the first week. It was just the first couple days we were hearing, oh my gosh, these Bayraktar drones are taking out the Ruskies. The Ruskies are defenseless. They have no anti-aircraft solutions. These drones just come in and, wallop the Ruskies, and then you stopped hearing about it. And the reason for that is that these drones just don't seem to be in the skies in the same numbers, presumably because they've been shot down. And I'm sure plenty of these billions will flow through the various alphabet soup NGOs who are, I'm sure, doing wonderful work to extract wealth from Ukraine. I mean, assist the Ukrainian people in their march towards democracy. And so we all know this is a big scam. And the only person in the Senate who was willing to come out right out and say it was Rand Paul. Rand Paul, for this, of course, has been castigated as a Putin stooge because, calling out government corruption, that's exactly what Vladimir Putin would want us to do. People are digging up old tapes of John McCain saying, the junior senator from Kentucky is doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin. And people are going, oh my gosh, John McCain warned us about Rand Paul. It's all coming true. The great John McCain. Rand Paul is saying we should have an inspector general to oversee the spending of these funds. I mean, what is he, nuts? That's exactly what Putin wants us to do. Putin wants us to keep track of our finances and try to not even inhibit corruption, just deter it slightly. But at the end of the day, the real reason why Rand Paul is such a villain to all these folks is that he's a traitor. He's siding with Putin against the interests of Washington during a time of war. Because as we were told by Steny Hoyer today, we're at war with Russia. And remember, it's Congress that declares war. Steny Hoyer, as a high-ranking, member of the House, I believe he's like second in command. I think he's the majority leader right now. He almost has, I would say he has as much or more authority to, without a formal declaration of war, to say the United States is at war with Russia, than the president does. Certainly he has more credibility, I think, than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden constantly, his own staff is walking back his own statements. So, I think you can take a statement from Steny Hoyer much more, seriously, especially since Congress, they're the ones who, under the Constitution, declare war. And so here you have essentially the second in command in the House of Representatives saying, unequivocally, we are at war with Russia. And so, if you believe that to be the case, as the average Democrat apparently does, what Rand Paul is up to is nothing short of treason. Anyone who questions this war or is against the war with Russia is a traitor to this country. That's the way that people have been treated in the past. That's the way that they were treated during the Civil War and World War I and World War II and the Vietnam War and the Iraq War. The attitude of Washington is always, you're either with us or against us. We are now past the point of any sort of debate on this topic. The debate is over. The Ruskies are our great enemy. And, if you, like me or Rand Paul, question that, you're no better than a Ruski puppet, just like that evil guy Henry Ford and Charles Lindbergh. They were nothing but Hitlerite Nazi puppets. Remember, the phrase America First was popularized largely by Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford, who and other prominent cultural leaders in this country who did not want to see us get sucked into World War II. And those people back then, they were merely labeled Nazi sympathizers, let alone full-on Nazi agents. These days, if you say you're against the war, a war which has been officially undeclared, nobody asked us. Here's the hilarious part. We were never asked, hey, should we go to war with Russia? There was never a debate about this. We're just supposed to accept, okay, well, yeah, Ukraine was always American territory. So if Russia attacks Ukraine, well, then obviously, they're declaring war on us. It's the joke from the start of this, from the first week of this, when people were saying, oh, yeah, Ukraine's borders are so sacred, unlike, the borders of the United States. To these people, that's true. To them, violating the borders of Ukraine is, that's the 1939 Nazi invasion of Poland. Of course, setting aside the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939. That's the shot heard around the world. It's the guns of August. And so now we, the United States, must mobilize as one great blob to fight these people. There's nothing to debate here. No one is entitled to an opinion, unless you have, of course, the correct opinion. There is no debate to be had, because the war is already here. We're already at war. This is what we're told. I don't think it's any accident when you hear that out of Steny Hoyer. It's not like we're talking about Joe Biden, and, he has these gaffes all the time. Biden could just say that off the cuff. Steny Hoyer, I've seen now 3 separate clips from today where he says, we're at war with Russia. He could not be any more clear. And this is not some random Democrat congressman. This is not Maxine Waters getting up there and saying, this Putin guy, he is absolutely terrible. And we are at war with Russia. This is not a crazy Maxine Waters. This is Steny Hoyer. Steny Hoyer, say what you will about him. He's one of these ancient Democrats like Nancy Pelosi. He's been around forever. But he's not a firebrand. And so it's clear at this point that what Washington seeks is total war with Russia. At the same time in which Jerome Powell is jacking up interest rates. I mean, if you folks can't look in the mirror and see that certain death is upon our society, I don't want to say the sky is falling, but it's about everything but that. Because if this war escalates, this war between the United States and Russia, if that escalates, the sky will be falling. Because there will be nuclear bombs exploding overhead and on the ground. There are enough nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia to destroy this planet like 40 times or something. These frauds, they're so concerned with your car, putting out carbon, which is going to lead to, 1/10 of a degree change in the average temperature of the planet over the next 500 years. But here they are simping for nuclear war, which will make our planet, I guess there have been articles disputing this lately, but most people up until this year would have said, well, yeah, a nuclear war will make this planet uninhabitable for human life. There are now people in pages of newspapers, I think the Washington Post published something like this in other newspapers, arguing, well, we don't really know what would happen, with a nuclear war, until we test it. We have to test our hypothesis. At this stage, it's just a hypothesis. It's not something that can be considered factual. I mean, at this point, we're one step removed from NATO troops fighting on the front lines, NATO infantrymen fighting on the front lines against the Russians in Ukraine. That's the next step. The next step would be Poles or Romanians or somebody like that. Not just embedding, as officers commanding Ukrainian infantrymen. From what I hear, the Ukrainian troops are starting to look a little more aged and less experienced. It seems that they are getting to the point to where a lot of the professional soldiers, and again, this is anecdotal, but this is what I keep hearing more and more of from multiple sources, people across just, general internet talk. It seems that a lot of the professional soldiers at this point have been killed or captured or deserted. And they are down to the less experienced troops. And the next stage after that, because remember, at the beginning of this war, men were not allowed to leave the country. Now we're seeing why. Because they were being held as surplus meat to be thrown into the Russian meat grinder if all of the cream of the crop was taken out. And so eventually, the Ukrainians will not be able to keep that up. Their forces will begin to collapse under the weight of the Russians. I mean, again, it's only a matter of time. The Russians could play this long and slow if they want, but because eventually they will win. They're bigger, they're more powerful. It's not a mystery. Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union under Russia, basically. Russia is the big country. Russia is, the empire. Ukraine is the satellite. Ukraine decided, well, I shouldn't say Ukraine decided. People were installed in Kiev who wanted to make Ukraine a satellite of the United States and the European Union rather than a satellite of Moscow. And so the Russians are reestablishing that old relationship. That's what we're witnessing. They have the power to do that. That is not in question. But if we're at war with Russia, are the folks in Washington willing to accept a defeat? I think we've been hearing a lot of projection throughout this war from the United States and the Western side in general, in which they keep talking about these things that, Russia will do this, Putin will act this way, blah, 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 this armchair psychology stuff that hasn't really panned out. And I'm not the first to observe this, but it seems to be that a lot of folks in the West are just projecting how they feel onto Putin. And so there's been a lot of talk lately, Putin, he's on the ropes, he's going to lose, the Ukrainians are going to march all the way to Moscow, they've all just about pushed the Russians out of Ukraine, 100% not true, But this is what people are thinking. So, Putin, his last ditch is, of course, going to be to deploy nuclear weapons and start, just nuking the battlefield. And he's going to turn Ukraine into a sheet of glass rather than, allow himself to be defeated by these, ragtag band of social justice warriors. But at this point, it's sounding, more like the opposite. If the Ukrainians get down to where they are where they can't hold on anymore, where they can no longer resist, and they're on the brink of being defeated, considering that it is the folks in the West, that it is the Americans in Washington and Congress who are now openly saying, hey, this is a war between the U.S. and Russia, do you think they're going to lie down and allow themselves to be defeated? Because that's how, the way they're phrasing it, that's what this will be. When Russia eventually wins over Ukraine, that will mean that Russia defeated the United States in a war. And that to me sounds like something that the Russia-gators simply just can't allow themselves to endure psychologically. So I don't know what else they have to say to make it clear that they're dragging us into this, that we are going to go down with Ukraine as far as they're concerned. At least that's the way they're talking right now. I mean, just normalcy bias makes that sound so insane to me, because it is insane. And I try to think, that can't be true. They can't mean that. But the way I have, at a certain point, I have to take them at their word. I'm not the first one to warn against this. Matt Gaetz, I think it was a couple days ago, gave a speech on the floor of Congress, talking about how, hey, these people here in Washington, they really want the United States to be directly involved in this war, more so than we are now. They consider it to be a war between the U.S. and Russia. And you could have written that off as, maybe fear-mongering back then. Oh, Gaetz is, he's a firebrand, as his book deal states. You can't take his word seriously. Well, here we are 2 days later, or so, give or take, and Steny Hoyer is openly proclaiming, multiple times, on the floor of the House, on the floor of Congress, we're at war with Russia. Russia's our adversary. We've got to take them down. Of course, Dan Crenshaw talking this way too. The $40 billion, it's great. It's money well spent. It's a way for us to fight our adversary, the Ruskies, and to inflict pain upon them without actually having to sacrifice American soldiers. We can just throw, Ukrainian young men into the Russian meat grinder instead. So that's politically for us here in the U.S. much more palatable, because then we don't have, the parents of dead veterans knocking down our door saying, hey, what the hell did my son die for? You only have to worry about the Ukrainian babushkas over there whose, sons and grandsons are dying for, the vanity of people like Dan Crenshaw. And if anyone does speak up over here, they'll be small enough in number that you can just dismiss them as Putin puppets. Somebody was asked me in the comments a couple days ago, hey, do you see any off-ramps for the U.S. and the U.K.? And they were talking specifically about, monetary policy. But I will expand that just in general. No, I don't see off-ramps. That's why I'm so pessimistic right now. Where's the off-ramp where these people say, hey, let's stop escalating. Let's just, let Russia do what they're going to do. Let's cut our losses here in Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine means much more to Russia than it does to us. The Russians are willing to take this, as far as they have to, because this is, an existential question for them. But I look at what our leaders are saying here about Russia. I look at what our leaders are saying about monetary policy. They're all going in the direction of more and more pain. And so if your leaders are telling you, hey, we're going to do these things, they're not saying, hey, we're going to cause you pain. Actually, Powell is. Powell is saying there will be pain. But these are everybody, Powell, Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, even also Mitch McConnell, who's all in on war with Russia. All these people are telling you, hey, we're going to do these things. They're not directly saying, hey, we're going to make your life a living hell, but they're telling you that they will do things which will make your life a living hell, which will impoverish you, which will make you poor, which will drive up the cost of food and fuel and everything that you need to buy in your life. And so I say, where are the off-ramps? These people are driving us off a cliff. That's your off-ramp. There is no ramp. You just fall into the abyss. And yeah, okay, stocks are green today. You can, go, oh, look, you're so stupid. Look, yeah, there's going to be rallies on the way down. It doesn't change what Powell said yesterday. Until what Powell said yesterday changes, the trajectory is clear. We're going down. Just like, hey, there are sell-offs in a time of a booming, financial market. That doesn't change the trajectory. It doesn't change the fact that the Fed, had a policy of pushing stocks and bonds and real estate higher and higher and higher. And that's what kept happening until they changed direction. And so now that they have changed direction, the Fed is going to keep pushing financial markets and the economy further down and down and down and down. It's not going to be in a straight line. Yes, there will be relief rallies and such. That is natural. There's actually been less than you would expect. So we're due for a pretty big rally at some point. And, on this war with Russia, things keep getting worse and worse and worse. The rhetoric is escalating and escalating, even though it's clear, absolutely, that there's no hope for the American side to win. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.